I'm not your babysitter, Claire, Melissa said, not even glancing up from the tray of Pearn Gorgonzola crostini she was aligning with tweezers like they were surgical specimens instead of appetizers. I have my own life, you know. The sentence landed with a thud and then ricocheted around the Hargroves' pristine kitchen. White quartz, brass poles, eucalyptus sprigs in a stone vase, as if it had nowhere else to go. My fever joined the echo, pulsing hard behind my eyes. I held the edge of the island because the room tilted just a little like the floor of a ferry when it nudges off the dock. I can't breathe without coughing, I managed, voice shredded. The ER said influenza with a borderline pneumonia. I just need 2 hours, just long enough to sleep. Please. The kids. Nora and Eli are adorable, she said, crisp, the way you'd compliment someone's reusable tote bag. But I have a sculpt and flow at 4, tasting at 7, then the board mixer. You can't just drop in and expect me to. Expect you to be family? The words came out harsher than I meant, edged by the ache that had set up camp along my ribs. I pushed the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The fleece smelled like our dryer sheets because I'd grabbed it from the hall linen closet when I realized I was shaking. Across the room, my children were sunk into the corner of the sectional, legs pretzeled under them, eyes glued to a cartoon. Nora, 6, was absently petting the satin binding of the throw pillow the way she does when she's nervous. Eli, 4, had a ring of juice around his mouth that I'd normally wipe with my thumb. I didn't move. Everything hurt. Melissa, I tried again, softer. I'm asking for one afternoon. I came here because you're 10 minutes from the clinic, because James texted me you'd be home, because I thought. You thought wrong, she said, and finally lifted her eyes. The look she gave me would have been pity if it had any warmth. And be careful with that blanket on the island stool. The boucle stains. I wasn't prepared for the humiliation that swelled up behind my irritation. It was thick, almost sweet, like the air before a thunderstorm. I heard the front door open and the shuffle of work boots. James. My brother stepped into the kitchen and paused, taking in the scene with that mechanic squint he gets when a customer says something rattles in third gear. His name, James Whitmore, fit him. Straightforward, a little old-fashioned. He still had grease under his nails, and his shirt had a stitched patch that said Whitmore Auto in blue block letters. His gaze flicked to my face and softened. Hey, you okay? Not really, I said. Could use help with the kids. Just for a bit. She needs a sitter, Melissa said, swiping a towel over an imaginary crumb. I told her I can't. Can't or won't? James asked, same question I had, same flat tone. Same thing, she said brightly, smoothing a flyaway of her honey blonde hair into submission. We're already late for class. If you want to skip, that's your call. There it was, familiar, practiced, Melissa's way of turning a no into an inevitable. She cinched the strap of her Lululemon bag over one shoulder. Oh, and Claire, she added with that soft weapon sweetness, next time text before you drop by. The house is staged for tonight. Stage. As if her life were a listing. James stared at the crostini, at me, at Melissa. In another universe he would have told her to cancel her class, would have walked over and picked up Eli and kissed Nora's hair and told me to go crawl into the guest room and he'd handle everything. In this universe my brother sighed and said, I'll see what I can do, like I was a flat tire someone had pointed out in the parking lot. He followed his wife down the hall. Their SUV chirped awake in the driveway. A second later the garage door rumbled and the house swallowed the sound like it swallowed everything else. Noise, mess, dissent. The silence that settled felt curated. I took 2 breaths and lost the third to a coughing fit that folded me in half. It seared all the way up and out, a dry bark that left me dizzy. I braced a hand on the counter and squeezed my eyes shut. I could still taste the metallic cherry of the ER cough syrup. Mom. Nora's voice, tentative. Are we staying here or going home? I started. The word tangled with a cough. I tried again. We're staying for a little while. Nora nodded, relief easing her worry into her shoulders. Eli didn't look up from the animated beagle on the screen. He hopped his cars along the cushion seam and made a soft BRM sound, happiest in routine always. I texted 2 friends. One was at a jury duty orientation in Center City, the other chaperoning a field trip at the Please Touch Museum. I opened the group chat from deployment spouses, typed, anyone free near Chestnut Hill? Sick. Need someone for 2 hours, and watched my plea disappear into the blue dot ether. Another coughing jag. Another stab of light behind my eyes. I swallowed a curse and reached for my water. My hand shook hard enough that the glass tapped the counter. I thought about lying down right here on the cool tile, and letting the house hum around me while my kids watched cartoons and Melissa's eucalyptus judged my choices. Instead, I made it to the breakfast nook and lowered myself onto the banquette like someone twice my age. I didn't cry. I'm not a crier. I'm the list maker, the lunch packer, the wheel figure it out. I'm the one who copies camp forms twice and keeps a spare inhaler in every bag. I'm the one who said, yes, I can handle 6 months when Kyle got his deployment orders and meant it, even when the first snow fell and the furnace croaked and I learned which pipe knocks when it's about to freeze. I am competent. A fever does not erase that. But competence can't hold a thermometer. It can't drive you home when your hands feel like someone else's. It can't tuck your children into bed while you sleep off the virus that finally found the crack in your armor. I stared out the window. Melissa's yard could have been in a catalog. String lights zigzagging over a bluestone patio, a teak dining set, a ceramic lemon tree in a pot the size of a toddler. Beyond the fence, the neighbor's maple was already dusted with early March buds, Philly pretending it was spring because it was tired of being gray. My phone buzzed. James, I'll be back by 5. We'll order pizza. Can you hang until then? Could I? I pictured the miles between 5 and now, stretched and thin and mean. It was barely 2. I didn't have the energy to resent the question, so I thumbed back okay. Thanks. I put the phone face down. Mom. Nora again, tiptoeing to the corner of the bench. Can I have a snack? Aunt Melissa has the crunchy bars. She said crunchy like it was a brand. Sure, I said and nodded at the pantry. She darted in the careful way of children in other people's houses, found the bars and brought me one too. I unwrapped it because it made her happy, took a bite because she watched and then felt the nausea rise and stopped just shy of dangerous. The back door clicked. I looked up startled, but it wasn't the garage, it was the fence gate. A woman stepped onto the patio wrapped in a long cardigan, cheeks pink from the wind. She knocked on the glass with 2 knuckles then eased the door open an inch. Melissa? She called and then seeing me gentled her voice. Oh, sorry I didn't mean to barge in. It's Ivy from next door. She was going to borrow my folding tables for tonight. Her eyes narrowed in the way women's eyes do when they assess another woman's temperature without a thermometer. You okay? Hi, I said and tried to smile. I'm Claire, James's sister. Melissa just stepped out. So she did, Ivy said not unkindly. She stepped inside, taking in the crostini, the eucalyptus, the absence of Melissa. You look like you were hit by a truck. You're said influenza. I glanced to the living room to my kids to the clock. I just need to make it to 5. Sit, Ivy said and was already moving, already pouring water, already finding a clean mug like she owned the cabinets. Ginger tea. And I'm grabbing my daughter to come over. No arguments. She put the water in the microwave and turned to me with a calm that felt medicinal. You can barely stand. I'm not leaving you like this. I'm not your responsibility, I said, automatic, a reflex shaped like apology. She nodded at the crostini. Neither are those. And yet. I let out a breath that might have been a laugh. It burned on the way out. Ivy set the mug in front of me with a slice of lemon like a benediction and then disappeared back out the door. She was gone 3 minutes. My phone buzzed again. One of the deployment spouses. Wish I could. On bus back from field trip. Do you want me to order you a lift? And I typed thanks maybe, and then Ivy was back, this time with a teenage girl with messy braids and glitter on her cheeks. This is Maud, Ivy said. She's 16, CPR certified and better with kids than most adults. She'll set them up with a movie in the den and some crackers. You, Claire, are going to lie down in the guest room and text your brother your location like a responsible adult. I started and then I nodded because resistance takes energy I didn't have. Maud drifted toward the living room with the gravity of someone children naturally orbit. Hi, I'm Maud, she chirped, and 2 minutes later Nora was telling her which Frozen song Eli would accept and which he'd boycott. I heard snack negotiations, the soft rustle of a blanket being tucked, the careful caretaking I hadn't asked for and suddenly needed like oxygen. Ivy led me down the hall to the guest room. It smelled like laundry and the perfume Melissa wears that makes me think of linen closets in expensive hotels. Ivy pulled back the duvet and helped me toe off my shoes like we'd done this a dozen times. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything, she said, tucking the blanket around my shoulders with a sure maternal press. Sleep. I'll ignore the crostini. I surprised myself by crying then, 2 hot, silent tears into a pillow that probably cost more than my winter coat. Ivy didn't fuss. She put a hand on my hair for half a second, the way my mother used to, and then she left me in a room where the afternoon light came in polite and gold and gentle. I slept. I woke up to the sound of the garage door and the smell of pizza, and for 2 blessed seconds I thought I was in my own house, in our creaky row home in East Falls where the hallway floorboard chirps like a bird and the kitchen light over the sink hums. Then I remembered the perfection of Melissa's guest room and the hollow echo of her, "I have my own life." It was after 6. My fever had settled a little, trading fire for a heavy ache. I pushed myself up and shuffled toward the kitchen. James was sliding a plain pie and a pepperoni onto the island. His face eased when he saw me. "Hey," he said. "You look better?" "Less like a cautionary tale," I said. "A neighbor rescued me. Ivy. And Maud." "Yeah," he said sheepish. "Ivy texted me. She said, and I quote, 'Your wife is staging a party. Your sister is staging a collapse. One of these is optional.'" He scrubbed a hand over his face. "I should have stayed. I'm sorry." "Thanks for the pizza," I said, which is not the same thing as forgiveness. The kids were already perched on stools, plates ready. Eli's cheeks were pink happy. Nora's eyes were on me in that way she has, measuring my health with a seriousness that always startles me. "Where's Melissa?" I asked, not looking toward the patio where string lights had flicked on against the early dark. "In the dining room," James said, which was code for wherever the adults are who matter. "Committee's here. They're walking through the flow for tonight." "Flow," I repeated. The cough tickled again. I swallowed it. We ate. The pizza was exactly right, greasy and perfect, the way only a day that asked too much of you can justify. Ivy and Maud lingered at the edge of the island like satellites, refusing payment with a flick of the hand and taking a slice as their fee. Maud made Eli giggle by making his carrot sticks march in a solemn parade. At 7, Melissa appeared, mascaraed and luminous, in a black jumpsuit and gold hoops. She looked like a magazine ad for the word effortless. She stopped at the threshold the way some people pause before stepping onto a stage. "Oh," she said as if we were an unexpected exhibit. "You're up." "I am," I said. "Thanks again for earlier." She glanced at James, at Ivy, at the neighbor women behind her carrying clipboards and tasting spoons. I watched the brief blur of calculation in her eyes, the one she thinks nobody sees. "Of course," she said finally, and the words fell out of the right order like coins in the wrong currency. "I'm glad it worked out." "It did," I said and took a sip of water so I didn't have to say anything else. Her committee swarmed in with a breeze of cold air and perfume. The house filled with people who knew the price of that ceramic lemon tree and the difference between sable and boar bristle pastry brushes. I leaned against the island and watched Melissa turn hostess. Watched her become the best version of herself in a room that rewarded polish and structure and an absence of need. She was good at this. I gave her that. She had a gift for orchestrating, for arranging, for controlling, for leaving. "Okay everyone," she called, clapping twice, and the living room hushed. "Let's run the sequence for tonight. Guests will arrive at 8. Champagne immediately. Trent, that's you by the door. Pass apps for the first 20. Then the donor wall reveal. Cynthia, cue the lights. After that we'll move folks out to the patio for the match announcement." "The what?" James asked quietly, frowning. "The match announcement," Melissa repeated, airy. "The board chair is surprising everyone with a dollar-for-dollar match for the Community Health Fund. It's going to be huge." Her eyes flicked toward me just long enough to register that she was, in fact, discussing a philanthropy event for a hospital system in front of someone who had spent the afternoon trying to keep her lungs from mutiny. "It's for a great cause." I set my water down carefully. "Which clinic?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Which neighborhoods?" Melissa blinked, then smiled the way people smile when cameras are on. "All of them," she said, which meant none of them, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from doing something ungracious like laugh. "You're still pale," Ivy murmured near my elbow, seeing me see it. "You should sit." "I'm okay," I said, and then lied again. "I'm okay." The doorbell rang and donors began to stream in. Linen coats, cashmere, laughter like clinking glass. Melissa vibrated with it. She introduced James as if he were an accessory from a masculine line, and me as Claire, my sister-in-law. The way you mentioned the provenance of a rug. Not crucial but interesting. People glanced at my face and then passed it, inventorying the room for people they'd rather talk to. I stayed 30 minutes, enough to make sure my kids were settled in the den with Maud's popcorn and a second movie. Enough to watch Melissa deliver the match announcement with the glide of a pro, to watch her face, composed, shining, when the board chair praised her tireless efforts. Enough to watch James clap dutifully, his jaw tight as if his hands and his expression belonged to different men. And then, because I am competent, because I know when to remove myself from a room that will not meet me halfway, I gathered Nora and Eli, thanked Ivy in a voice that cracked, pressed a 20 into Maud's palm that she tried and failed to refuse, and shouldered our tote bag from under the island where Melissa stores reusable grocery sacks that have never seen a grocery. James walked us to the door. The January air, it still felt like January no matter what the maples believed, bit my cheeks and woke up the headache I'd been taming with willpower. In the driveway he put a hand on my arm. "I'm sorry," he said again, earnest and small. "I know," I said. I touched his hand. "Text me when you're done tonight. Or if you need anything." I almost said protection and then I didn't. He nodded, eyes shining in the porch light. "Drive safe." I buckled Eli into his seat. Nora leaned forward and whispered, "I liked Maud." I said, "Me too." I turned the heat up and the radio down. I pulled out of the cul-de-sac and onto the quiet grid of Chestnut Hill, past porches strung with white lights that never came down after December, past tidy hedges that would need trimming in a month. In the rearview mirror, the house receded, lights bright and generous against the dark, the patio glowing like a promise. 5 blocks later, at a stop sign, I realized my hands were shaking so hard I could see the tremor over the steering wheel. I pulled over by a park and let my forehead press to the cool top of the wheel. A breath. Another. I did not cry. I counted to 8 on the inhale and 8 on the exhale the way the nurse in the ear had shown me when the wheeze got mean. "You okay, Mommy?" I asked small. "I am," I said, and this time it was almost true. "We're going home." I didn't know then what would happen 3 weeks later in that same curated kitchen under those same string lights. I didn't know what domino was already tipping because of what she'd chosen today. I didn't know that the woman who told me she had her own life would soon need a life raft with my name on it. I didn't know. But karma did. And karma, I would learn, has exquisite timing. People always act like families are built out of big things. Births and weddings and the kind of holidays that require iron napkins. But the architecture of a family is really 1,000 small choices stacked. Melissa's choices stacked neatly like her labeled pantry bins. Mine stacked like the leaning towers kids build. Functional, a little chaotic, made to be repaired with tape. I met her the night James introduced us at an Eagles game watch party in Manayunk. She walked into the bar in a cream sweater that repelled beer the way Teflon repels eggs, and smiled like someone had just announced the room would be graded on a curve. "You're Claire," she said, eyes sweeping me fast as a scanner at the grocery store. Coat from Target, boots scuffed, hair air-dried. "James says you're practical." "I try," I said. "Good," she replied as if I'd met a prerequisite. "Every family needs one." I could list the ways she was charming when it cost nothing. Birthday texts with balloon emojis, a vase of grocery store tulips at my door the week Kyle shipped out, a thoughtful Instagram comment when Nora lost her first tooth. But every charm had a string, and the string was always Melissa. Take the wedding. She wanted a backyard ceremony at her aunt's place in Haddonfield, which was very coastal grandmother if you ignored the part where the New Jersey humidity turns hair into honest testimony. I offered to help with logistics because I am who I am. I had spreadsheets before she had a florist. "You're a lifesaver," she told me, then spent 2 weeks ignoring my emails while booking a band that required a tent we couldn't afford. The day before, the rental company called me, not her, because the check hadn't cleared. I drove across town at lunch and handed over my debit card for the deposit. "It's just a hold," she chirped, air kissing my cheek. "You're an angel." The hold took 4 days to drop. We ate pantry soup those 4 days and I smiled in their photos. Or the time my brake line rusted through on Henry Avenue and I called James because he's the human equivalent of a reliable lug nut. He was at the shop and said he'd be there in 20, then texted 10 minutes later, "Melissa has me on a pickup for her dress fitting, can you Uber?" I was on the shoulder with my hazards on and the kids watching rain race down the glass, and I told myself this wasn't a pattern, just a day. When he arrived 90 minutes later, he was breathless and apologetic and carrying 2 cupcakes from the place Melissa likes. Like sugar could soak up something heavier than bad timing. There were bright spots. When Eli was born, Melissa showed up at the hospital with a basket of expensive baby bath products that made our bathroom smell like a boutique for 6 months. She took selfies with him and captioned them, "Aunt Life equals best life," with a heart emoji, and tagged the hospital foundation because she tags the hospital foundation in things it doesn't belong in, like brunch. She said, "Text me anytime," the way people say it when they like the shape of generosity more than the practice. When I had a miscarriage between Nora and Eli, I texted her at 3 a.m. because you text the women in your life at 3 a.m. She responded at 7:42 with, "Oh no. Do you need anything? I can bring flowers after my Pilates. Would peonies be too much?" I stared at the phone and then turned its screen down and let it buzz itself quiet on the nightstand. James. He's the guy who carries the heavy cooler without being asked, who notices when your inspection sticker is about to expire. He fell in love with Melissa the way mammals do, completely before they know they're wet. He loves his work and he loves that Melissa has a million ideas, and he tries very hard not to see how often her ideas depend on someone else's Tuesday afternoon. The first big clue about Melissa's version of giving back arrived wrapped in a gala invite. She joined the hospital foundation board because it looks good on a bio, and because the hospital's logo photographs well with champagne. "It's all about storytelling," she told me, sliding a sponsorship deck across my kitchen table. "People want to feel like they're fixing something." "Are we fixing something?" I asked, flipping through pages of stock photos of smiling nurses and a line graph that ascended with purpose. He laughed, musical. "We're fixing how they feel. The foundation did do good work. Ivy volunteers at the mobile clinic on Thursdays. I've seen the line of strollers for the vaccination pop-ups and the way the staff knows the grandmas by name." But Melissa's heart belonged less to the clinic and more to the donor wall font. She had opinions about serif weights. She had a Pinterest board titled Philanthropy Vibes, which is a sentence that could be its own thesis. She also had a rivalry, unacknowledged like most rivalries, with a woman named Cassandra, who raises uncomfortable amounts of money by being relentlessly competent and not caring if people think her blazer is too severe. Melissa called her Cass, which Cass hates, and smiled like a pageant contestant when Cass spoke, and then told me later, "She has the bedside manner of a stapler." The board chair, a man who says "doc" to surgeons who hate it, played them off each other like it was cute. Meanwhile, life at our house was sticky and loud and real. Kyle left for his deployment with 7 labeled Ziplocs snapped in our freezer and a list of passwords he renewed monthly like a ritual. Our goodbye at the airport was not cinematic. We didn't kiss in a sunbeam. He hugged me too long outside the TSA line and said into my hair, "Breathe, okay?" And I said, "You too," and then he was swallowed by people wearing shoes that take too long to remove. We FaceTimed on Sundays when the Wi-Fi cooperated. I didn't tell him the furnace noise scared me. He didn't tell me the sand got into everything, even letters. Sometime in November, the school nurse called to say Nora had a fever and needed to go home, and I was across town in a checkout line with a cart full of practical mortal things: toilet paper and string cheese and the $12 hand soap that smells like eucalyptus because Melissa's house had gotten in my head. I texted James. He was under a Camry. Melissa was at a tasting. I called the neighbor, Mrs. Green, who keeps watch through her lace curtains like it's a vocation, and she walked to school and held Nora's hand and told me I was a good mother when I arrived breathless. I still tear up when I see her sorting coupons at her kitchen table. The architecture of a family, we reinforce it with strangers too. Once, after Thanksgiving, Melissa borrowed my Dutch oven and returned it 4 weeks later with a faint ring at the bottom like a pale moon. "We made short ribs," she said and kissed my cheek. "You have to give me the recipe." I didn't have to do anything. And through all this, Ivy waved from across the fence and sent us brownies sometimes the day before she delivered them to the clinic cafeteria as a surprise. She knows doctor schedules by the tilt of their shoulders. She never said anything unkind about Melissa. He didn't have to. So when the ER nurse said, "influenza," and I texted James and he texted back that Melissa was home and I drove my foggy body and my 2 kids to the curated museum of her kitchen, I was not expecting a parade. I was expecting the bare minimum mercy we owe to each other because otherwise the world gets thinner and meaner and something tears. "I'm not your babysitter" wasn't just a sentence. It was an eraser. After I left that night with the kids bundled in their coats, the 3 days that followed were a blur of humidifier steam and cartoons and text from Kyle with grainy photos of tan lines that made me laugh. Ivy dropped off soup and promised Maud could come again, if the wheels fall off. And the wheels did a little, but we limped fine. James sent pizza on night 2. Melissa posted a carousel from the event with a caption about, "A community that cares." And I threw my phone to the other end of the couch and said a word I tell the kids not to say. On day 4 my fever broke. I woke up clammy and light as a popped balloon. The cough had moved down from vicious to rude. I showered for the first time with the door open so I could hear the kids destroying the living room with couch cushion forts. I stood under hot water and let the weeks burn off. James texted me a picture of Eli in Maud's sunglasses with a caption, "You have competition," and I sent back 16 heart emojis because emojis are the currency of people who love each other and don't have time for essays. That afternoon, as the light tipped gold again as if detouring towards spring, I did what competent people do. I started cleaning up the life that had hardened around the illness. Laundry. Dishes. A grocery list scalloped with apologies to future me. The doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened it to find Melissa on my porch, cheeks flushed, hair shoved into a ponytail that had lost the battle hours ago. "Hey," she said, breathless, stepping inside without waiting. "I need," she broke off, scanning the chaos of blanket forts and crayons and a Lego city that would make a civil engineer cry. She swallowed whatever observation she wanted to make and resumed, "I need a huge favor." The words were familiar. I could have stamped them on a mug. "I'm just starting to feel human," I said, holding the door a beat longer than polite. "What's going on?" Her eyes shone. Not the glitter she paints on her lids for evening events. A wetness she didn't control. "It's complicated," she said, which is what people say when they want you to do something without asking questions. "The donor dinner Saturday. There's a situation. Cass," she said the name like it had thorns, "is out. He's sick. The chair asked me to step in and present the clinic initiative, the whole case study. He wants numbers, maps, outcomes. He wants authenticity." She said the last word like she'd read it off an index card. I said yes. "Okay," I said carefully. "And you're here because?" "Because I need it to be flawless," she said, and the reflex turned her face shiny again. "And you know this stuff. You worked at the free clinic in Ohio before the kids. You can make data sound like people. I need you to help me build the deck. I need you to rehearse with me. I need..." She stopped and took a breath that hit her ribs like a speed bump. "Please." The afternoon tilted just a little like the floor of a ferry. I thought about her saying, "I have my own life," and about Ivy in my kitchen making tea as if a neighbor's need were a commandment. I thought about all the tiny choices stacked into the architecture of us. I thought about Kyle telling me on the phone last night, "You don't get points for martyrdom, babe. Do what you can. Protect the core." I stepped back and let her in. "Sit," I said, because I have learned that sometimes mercy is not about the deserving. Tell me exactly what you have. Tell me exactly what they expect. And tell me why you said yes to something you don't understand. She blinked, stung, then sat. "Because," she said, hands twisting in her lap, "if I do this right, the chair will put me up for vice chair next year. It's a huge step. And because James's and my savings took a hit after the roof thing and vice chairs get stipends and..." She stopped, cheeks coloring like she'd leaked something private. "Hey," I said. "Get your laptop." She did. We built slides while the kids built a castle. I asked her questions she couldn't answer and then called people who could. Ivy texted me a photo of a whiteboard in the clinic hallway with numbers that mattered, with words like no-show rates and food insecurity and bus pass vouchers distributed. Melissa wrote them down with careful penmanship and looked at the letters like they might rearrange into a language she spoke. We worked until twilight. I warned her about questions donors ask when they want credit without responsibility. I told her to say partnered instead of led. I told her a story about Mrs. Green's neighbor who skipped her blood pressure meds to buy groceries and the ER visit that followed. And Melissa's face dawned with something like comprehension. "People," she said softly. "Not line items." "Both," I said. "If you want them to spend." When she left, the deck had bones. The talk had beats. She hugged me in the doorway in a way that surprised us both. "Thank you," she said, and for once the words didn't feel misordered. "I'm sorry about the other day." "I know," I said. It wasn't absolution. It was a marker in the dirt. After the kids were in bed, I emailed Ivy the draft slides and asked if she'd poke holes in them in the morning. She replied in 6 minutes with a bullet list that made me want to applaud. I brushed my teeth and sat on the edge of my tub and let my head fall forward until the light from the vanity made a little halo on the tile, and I thought, maybe this is the turn. Maybe this is where we rewrite us. I didn't know yet that 3 days later, in a dining room with brass poles and eucalyptus sprigs and a donor wall mock-up leaning against the hutch, Melissa would stand up and open her mouth and discover that karma doesn't need a script. I didn't know that the deck we'd built would be the needle that popped her perfect balloon. I didn't know that all those small choices stacked were about to shift. Melissa's dining room was lit like a photograph. Every bulb dimmed to that golden point where faces look softer and glassware catches light without glare. The table was dressed in cream linen with a line of low arrangements, white ranunculus, pale roses, something green and feathered, snaking down the center. Place cards in calligraphy. Chargers under the plates. Napkin rings that felt heavier than they looked. I arrived early because Melissa asked, and because I wanted to see how she'd positioned herself in the space. She wore a fitted navy sheath dress and a pair of heels sharp enough to slice paper. Her hair was in a smooth twist. She looked prepared. At least on the outside. Slides are loaded, she said when I stepped in, gesturing to her laptop open on the sideboard. Chair says he wants me to present right after the entree. That's good, I said, setting my tote under a side chair. People will be warm from the wine, not yet distracted by dessert. She gave a short, nervous laugh. I wish James could run the clicker for me. He can, I said, but it's better if you do it. You control the pace. Remember, own the room. Melissa nodded, repeating my words under her breath like a spell. Own the room. Guests began arriving in that way wealthy people do. Unhurried, glossy, already mid-conversation. Coats disappeared onto a rack near the stairs. James worked the doorway like a man who has shaken hands with every mechanic in the tri-state area. Easy smile, solid eye contact. The board chair, Edwin Harriman, arrived with his wife on his arm, both of them in deep jewel tones, both wearing the sort of confidence that comes from being thanked in annual reports. And then Cassandra walked in. Melissa's eyes flicked to mine before she pasted on her pageant smile. Cass, she said like she was surprised to see her. Melissa, Cassandra replied, her own smile neat, controlled. I heard you're stepping in tonight. Brave of you. The words were neutral. The tone was not. Dinner began with an heirloom beet salad so pretty it looked like it had been plated by a jeweler. Conversation stayed light. Foundation gossip, holiday travel plans. A quick debate about the best restaurants in Rittenhouse Square. I kept my voice low, helping Melissa run through her opening in a whisper between bites. When the plates were cleared and the servers reappeared with trays of salmon and filet, Edwin tapped his glass. Friends, he said, tonight we have something a little special before dessert. You all know our clinic initiative has been dear to my heart. And when our original presenter came down ill, he paused, nodding toward Cassandra with just enough emphasis to make Melissa's win visible. Melissa Whitmore graciously agreed to step in. She's worked tirelessly this week to prepare something that captures both the impact and the urgency of our mission. Polite applause. Melissa stood, smoothed her skirt, and walked to the head of the table with a confidence I wasn't sure she felt. She clicked to the first slide, just as we'd practiced. A photograph of the clinic's mobile unit parked on a street where kids rode scooters in the background. Good evening, she began, voice even. Some of you have seen our mobile clinic out in the neighborhoods. Some of you haven't. Tonight I want to show you not just what it looks like, but who it reaches and why that matters. She moved through the early slides smoothly, usage stats, growth curves, geographic maps with shaded areas showing coverage gaps. I watched faces around the table lean forward, eyes on the screen. And then she got to the stories. This is Mrs. Green, she said, clicking to a photo of the neighbor who had once rescued me at school pickup. She's lived in West Oak Lane for 40 years. She came to our clinic last summer for her blood pressure check, and when she mentioned she'd been skipping medication to pay for groceries, our staff was able to connect her to food assistance. That intervention prevented an ER visit and kept her stable. And she is one of hundreds. I saw something shift in the room. This wasn't Melissa's voice of the gala. This was her speaking with something closer to belief. She told them about the bus pass program, about the prenatal care unit, About the diabetes education classes Ivy runs in the church basement on Thursdays. She was 2 slides from the close when it happened. From the far end of the table, Cassandra leaned forward, her tone sugar over glass. Melissa, this is a very comprehensive presentation. I'm curious, how many hours have you personally spent working at the clinic? The question landed like a pebble in still water. Small but ripples everywhere. Melissa froze for half a beat. We hadn't rehearsed that question. She began and then stopped. Her eyes flicked to me just for a second. I haven't worked there directly. My role is on the board, facilitating resources. Cassandra smiled, tilting her head. Of course. I only ask because it's so clear someone with first-hand experience prepared these slides. Every head turned, some subtly, toward me. Melissa swallowed. Yes, she said finally. I had help from my sister-in-law, Claire. She's worked in community health and... Edwin leaned in, interested. Claire? Would you stand a moment? I hadn't planned to, but his tone made it less of a request. I stood, palms damp. She's being modest, Melissa said, and for the first time in a long time, I believed the sincerity in her voice. I could not have done this without her. There was a murmur of acknowledgement, a few nods, a few glances that seemed to reframe me from tag-along relative to asset. Melissa finished her talk. She closed on the donation match announcement, and the room applauded warmly, some already reaching for their checkbooks or phones. Edwin announced that with the match, the foundation had just surpassed its quarterly goal, by a wide margin. Through it all, Cassandra's smile didn't flicker. After dessert, as people stood to mingle, Edwin made his way over to me. Impressive work, he said. We could use more people on the board who understand both the data and the human side. If you're ever interested. I thanked him, demurred. I could feel Melissa's eyes on me, unreadable. James appeared at my side, drink in hand. That was something, he said quietly. I think you saved her. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just gave her the truth and she used it. What I didn't say, truth has a way of sticking to the person who speaks it. And in rooms like this, that can be the start of a shift. As coats were retrieved and goodbyes exchanged, Cassandra passed me, leaning just close enough to say, nicely done. It didn't sound like a compliment. I watched her go, wondering if she'd meant for Melissa or for me. Melissa hugged me at the door longer than usual. You didn't have to stand up, she said. You didn't have to mention me, I replied. Yeah, she said softly. I did. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. The kind of air that lets you see your breath, the kind that makes you feel awake all the way down. I had no idea yet that the dinner's ripples would reach farther than Melissa ever intended, and that one of those ripples would come right back to her doorstep when she needed help the most. And this time the choice to answer would be mine. The Monday after the dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from Ivy. Your sister-in-law just called the clinic. Sounded frazzled. Said she'd stop by tomorrow. Melissa at the clinic was like seeing a swan in a kiddie pool. It just didn't happen. I sent back a question mark and Ivy replied, didn't say why. But she asked about bus schedules. By Tuesday afternoon I had the rest of the picture. Melissa showed up on my porch in black leggings and a sweatshirt with the foundation logo, her hair in a messy bun that wasn't curated for Instagram. No makeup, just tired eyes and the faint red blotches of stress along her neck. Can I come in? She asked, not meeting my gaze. The kids were in the living room building Lego towers, so I stepped aside. What's going on? She sat at the kitchen table, tracing the grain of the wood with her thumbnail. It's my sister, Danielle. You've never met her, she lives in Reading. Single mom. She's been sick since Friday and now the doctor says it's pneumonia. Her little boy Caleb is 4. She doesn't have anyone to watch him and she called me this morning crying. I waited. I told her I'd figure something out, Melissa said. But I can't get up there until late tonight. And I have this donor lunch at noon tomorrow that I can't miss. She needs someone to watch him until she's home from the hospital. And you came to me, I said. Her eyes flicked up. You're good with kids. And you work from home. I've also got 2 kids of my own, I reminded her. And I've been where she is. I asked you for the exact same kind of help less than a month ago. She winced like I'd pressed on a bruise. I know. And I was awful. I keep thinking about that night. I told you I had my own life and now, she broke off, shaking her head. Now I'm the one asking. It was quiet in the kitchen except for the sound of Eli and Nora giggling in the other room. "What does she need exactly?" asked finally. "A full day, maybe 2, Melissa said quickly. "She doesn't trust leaving Caleb with a sitter he doesn't know." "I'd pay you, of course." I thought about Mrs. Green holding Nora's hand when I couldn't get there. About Ivy's ginger tea. About Maud showing up with glitter on her cheeks and saving my afternoon. "I'll do it," I said, and her relief was immediate. Shoulders dropping, breath let out like air from a balloon. "Thank you, Claire. Seriously. I owe you so big." "You do," I said, because there was no point pretending otherwise. As she left, promising to bring Caleb that evening, I realized something. This wasn't about evening the score. It was about letting her sit in the exact seat I'd been in, feeling the same mix of fear and need and humility. Karma didn't always arrive like a hammer. Sometimes it was a mirror. And Melissa was about to get a very clear view. Caleb arrived just after 7 that night, clinging to Melissa's leg with the stubborn grip of a scared 4-year-old. His curls were sticking up in every direction, his Spider-Man backpack slung low on his shoulders. "This is Aunt Claire," Melissa told him softly, crouching down to meet his eyes. "She's going to take care of you until Mommy's feeling better." Caleb looked at me, then at Nora and Eli peeking around the corner. Nora gave him a small wave. Eli held up a Lego car like a peace offering. Within minutes, the 3 of them were on the living room rug, building an entire block of mismatched houses. Caleb didn't speak much, but he didn't cry either. That was enough for now. Melissa lingered in the doorway. "I'll be back tomorrow night if all goes well. I can check in during lunch." "Go," I said. "He's fine." She hesitated. "Claire, I meant what I said earlier. I was wrong before. I thought being too busy was an excuse everyone understood. I didn't think about what it feels like to be asking because you have no choice." I just nodded. Safe drive. The next day passed in a whirl of snacks, crayons, playground trips, and refereeing over who got the blue swing. Caleb started smiling by mid-morning. By afternoon, he and Eli were sharing cheese sticks like old friends. Melissa texted around 5. "Danielle's being discharged. I'll pick Caleb up tonight." She showed up at 8, looking less frazzled but more quiet. She stepped inside and watched Caleb show her the paper crown Nora had made him. "That's amazing," she said, ruffling his curls. When the kids wandered off to put the crown in his backpack, Melissa turned to me. "I've been thinking about what you said. That night you came over sick, I told myself I was protecting my time. But really, I just didn't want to be uncomfortable. And that's not family." For a moment, neither of us spoke. "You don't owe me an apology," I said finally. "You owe me understanding. And you owe the next person who asks you for help the same thing you wanted for your sister this week." Her eyes shimmered, and for once she didn't try to fill the space with words. When she left, Caleb asleep on her shoulder, I stood in the doorway for a long moment. The air was cold, the sky clear. I thought about how fast tables turn, how quickly we can find ourselves needing the thing we once refused to give. Karma had come quietly. No grand scene, no public humiliation. Just a moment where the mirror was held up and the reflection couldn't be ignored. And in that quiet, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, but peace. Because this time I hadn't just evened the score. I changed it.